Hey guys, I've got a 60-minute game on the board now against an opponent rated just over 700. I've started with e4 with the white pieces, and my opponent has replied with the French defence, e6. So I'll grab the centre. So looking for common typical mistakes that players around the 700 to 800 mark might make, and okay, I think I'll leave the tension there. And I'm going to play knight to c3. I've never really played this before. It means I could recapture with the knight if I wanted to. So what are we expecting to see? We're expecting to see unforced errors, blunders, hanging pieces, potentially. Hopefully my opponent will take their time and play carefully. Must have played the French before. Okay, now I'm going to take the opportunity to push the pawn. So we've got advanced French now, but it kicks the knight, so I gain a tempo with that. That means that knight is going to have to spend another move getting out the way, and can't go to either of those two squares. On here, I could capture with a knight, pawn recaptures, and then black's got doubled pawns on the e-file. That's a bit of a detriment, but also coming back here blocks in the light squared bishop and to some extent the queen as well. Okay, do I want to swap off my knight? Or so I don't want him to take on there and have to recapture with the b pawn. It's not the end of the world if I do that. Okay, let's allow that, because I think that my king can be quite safe in this corner. My bishop can come out. I could have attacking ideas down the king side. So if takes, I will recapture with the b pawn. And that then gives me a spare pawn, you see, on c3 that I could use to push with later on. Let's make a red one, yeah? So if takes, I can push on there. And if captures, maybe bishop captures, and then I've got the pawn majority. I've still got these three central pawns, and black would be a little short. Okay, I'm going to pin that knight. I don't think the knight has ideas of capturing the pawn, but let's pin it anyway. It comes with developing a piece and opens up the path to castle kingside. But a fairly solid start to the game so far. And it's nice to see players at this level playing 60 minutes, because it gives you time to think. Time to double check your moves. So if I initiate the exchange now, I've got pawn takes now, then my knight's going to be under threat. But my knight could come here, defended by the bishop. So I don't think it would be bad. Okay, there we go. We have the exchange of knights. This knight's still pinned. I'm kind of expecting bishop to d7 to break the pin. I still have this push. I could push that at any time. So if pawn takes, I've even got bishop takes. Yeah, let's go for this. Don't see a problem. If knight takes pawn, I've got knight takes knight, and then the bishop's still double defended. Yes, I don't want to neglect my king safety, so I should castle at some point. But this is like a tactical opportunity, so I'm using my spare doubled pawn as a sacrificial attacker. So he takes, now I can take with the bishop. My rearmost pawn is defended twice. I might push this pawn, but next I want to be thinking about castling. We are similar in terms of development. We've still both got a bishop on the back rank, still both got a queen on the back rank, and we still both haven't castled. So he's going to want to move his bishop, but doesn't actually have that many squares. Can't go there. That's a possibility, so that's that in blue. Can't go there, can't go there, could go there. But I think this move with check might be the most forcing. I'll just block with the bishop if so. I can't push the pawn because it just falls to the bishop, and then with a nasty fork here, which we don't want to happen. Okay, so I'm going to block with the bishop. It's better than blocking with the knight because my knight's already developed and it's on its natural square on f3, good defensive square. So now if bishop takes, I can take with the queen and I'm slightly in front in development. This bishop's looking awkward, and this knight doesn't have many options either. Okay, I'm just going to castle now. This pawn is still defended, although that bishop's now blocking the queen's defense. It's still defended by the knight, so I need to repurpose this dark squared bishop at some point. It's not looking great in the middle of the field, because look at where it's actually pointing. Completely harmless. It's being towards the rear and in the middle. The bishop is now, its attacks are going off the sides of the board, which is not entirely useful. Then maybe there's scope on h6. For example, if castles, and if I can get a queen or a rook onto this g-file, then that is a move. A good solid play so far. I do have a space advantage here, with my pawns this far up the board, and black's only got one pawn off the mark. So with a space advantage, I learned in my chess lesson this week, you don't want to be going swapping pieces, because actually black with his pieces crammed into this corner is at more of a disadvantage because his pieces get in each other's way. Whereas for me, I have more scope to move around to a degree. So it's fine for me to keep my pieces on the board. Swapping off material at this point would actually help. It would minimize the negative impact of black's lack of space. See, now the queen's completely rammed in, the bishop's completely hemmed in. This knight could go to here. That is a possibility because it's defended by the bishop. So I might even think about playing a3 at some point just to stop that idea as well. Okay. I don't see how that isn't a blunder. He's just swapped a knight for a pawn. And I was just praising him about how well he was using his time and how solid we were playing, but I can't see a counter-attack from this. I really can't. So that's simply an unforced error. So he probably saw that the queen wasn't defending the pawn because the bishop's in the way, but just didn't spot that the knight was defending the pawn. And this is those times when you really have to practice visualizing. I put my knight on there, what could happen? Look at the whole board, look at every piece. You've got time to do that. And knight takes, so just swapped a knight for a pawn. Does leave this pawn more vulnerable now. So I might end up putting my bishop maybe on c3. Knight comes back here. Let's put the knight back there now. See, discovered attacks now would be absolutely fine. I can't really do that because queen takes, rook takes, then I lose my bishop. So now I think, ideas of centralising my rooks. So I've got an isolated pawn there, and a fairly isolated one there, because the f-pawn's not going to be coming up there in a hurry. Okay, maybe time just to rearrange my bishops. I think putting that bishop now, looking h7, seems to make a lot of sense. Could even move my queen across, say, to c1, with the idea of playing knight to g5. So then we've got two attackers against this pawn, which may be forced to move. And also with my queen here, it means there's two defenders on the g5 square. So my knight can go there. That's the thought. Okay, so we've got a f7 to f5. Now I have a critical decision to make, whether I'm going to capture en passant. If I don't, then that diagonal is going to be closed to me for some time. If I do, what are we going to get? Bishop there? I think it's okay, I'm going to go for it. I just don't like the idea of this pawn chain on there stopping my light squared bishop. I'd like to use both of my bishops in my attack and clearing any material out of this king side, at least on black side of the board. Makes sense. I want to keep my king's protection very close and tight. That wasn't what I was expecting. I'd have thought the bishop would have recaptured with an attack on the rook, but okay. Definitely got prospects now. I could even drop my bishop straight in there. Should force the rook to move. I also want to bring my queen in at some point. Let's just move one piece in. I'm thinking my knight may move. h4 isn't a great place for the knight because it can't really advance to either of those two squares. Okay, rook's had to move. What's the plan? I'm going to play my rook to e1. So ideas of knight to d4 and then capture that pawn if I can. Further open up the space, it's only defended once. Okay, all these pawn moves are not going to help in the long run. We've even got maybe sack the knight, pawn captures, rook captures, and then we've got a dangerous situation going on. That looks like fun. Yeah, I think just moving the knight out of the way does make some sense. Or I could play, for example, knight here and then knight to there. That's also nice. Yeah, that's probably better. There's no point giving up a knight for two pawns if there's no reason. And it is a potential attacking piece, so let's try and use it for an attack. So if I can get my knight to there, for example, and queen here with check. Rook can't block. Knight can capture the bishop if need to. But this is not a good bishop. This bishop is actually much better right now because of the pawns on the light squares, on the dark squares. So the light square bishop is probably better. This is stuck as in a defensive position. That might as well be a pawn, really. Okay, so you're attacking my rook. That's fine by me. I'm just going to come back here. I could block with my bishop, but there's no point. Forwards is the best direction. Oh, I see another tactic here, which I could have executed then. Bang! Bishop takes h7 check, leaving an undefended queen right there. So I could have pulled that. As soon as that rook moved forward, no, the bishop was defending the queen. Okay, so the rook moves forward. I move across, pawn, knight, now bishop, and yes, now the tactic is on the board. Okay, so the bishop's moved back to attack the rook, but I'm not concerned because I have a lovely check, winning the queen. Let's grab the queen, might lose the bishop. This is going to leave me significantly ahead in material. Okay, I now have a check with the knight, but I don't because bishop can capture. So, queen here. This pawn's undefended, so rook blocks. I've got check. Only one legal move. And then I think rook takes e5 is checkmate. Oh no, bishop can block it, but that's all. So now I'm expecting bishop blocks there and rook takes or resignation. Oh no, well done. Spotted another move. Okay, so the knight's defended, so I just need to check the king, and that's another checkmate. Okay, so good game. So let's review. Again, as so often, the game pivots on a blunder, an unforced error. So we've got a pin, we've got an exchange, mess the pawns up, it's fine. Get ready to use my spare pawn, attack, block, castles, and this is it. This is the blunder. Totally unforced, didn't have to happen. Bishop for some reason then retreats, and I am now then able. I think this was maybe rash as well. He was asking for the en passant. I've got this kind of stray pawn there that's not really doing much. All it's really doing is waiting for this move. So then I get rid of that pawn. Now the king's exposed. Pieces start to move in. And then we have the tactic. Bang. Discovered attack on the queen. Yeah, simple tactics really. It's not completely obvious. It's not like a capture or something like that. But the discovered attack. My queen is defended, black's queen isn't, and you should always look out for this dangerous bishop takes h7 or bishop takes a7 or a2 or h2 with check if the queen could fall as well. So useful tactic, I think, to remember, very important one to bear in mind. Like I said, I missed it for a couple of turns, but in the end it was more than enough to seal the game. So what do you need to do to beat 700 players? Or if you are based around 700, you've got to learn your tactics. I mean, we've had this whole game has turned on two simple tactics. The first was attacking a piece thinking it was undefended when it was defended. So that's just a matter of simply looking at the board and being absolutely sure before you made that move. And then secondly, this one, I mean, how do you spot this? I mean, one approach is on every turn to say to yourself, which of my pieces and which of my opponent's pieces are undefended, okay? So here, the bishop is undefended and the queen is undefended. I mean, technically as well, that rook, okay? These are the undefended pieces on my opponent's side. So if my opponent was looking at their own board going, okay, what's undefended? Then possibly that could have been a little easier to spot. Another thing that you can ask yourself is, does my opponent have any checks? Well, yes. 1, 2 checks. Okay. If they check, then what? That's another important thing to ask. If they check with the bishop, oh no, yes, I see, my queen. You know, so it's not completely obvious, but if you're going to get beyond 1,000 and keep climbing, then these are the kinds of tactics that you need to learn to spot. Good patterns. Another one I notice here, of course, is simply bishop to c4 with the king and the rook on the same light square diagonal. So all black could do there would be to block with the bishop. No good, I just capture and it's the pin is still there. So you've got to look after your position. You've got to look after your pawns. You've got to look after your king's safety, and more than anything else, when you're playing a 60-minute game, take your time, for goodness sake, and don't make an unforced error right at the beginning of the middle game like that, because it's no fun playing chess when you have to be scrabbling to try and get a foothold in the game all the way through. So yeah, so good start by my opponent. As I said, expected, we'd be looking at hanging pieces, unforced errors, simple tactics, and that is actually what decided the game. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and I'll see you soon.